and then I'll share my desktop. Okay. Okay. So here, so again, I think the outcomes are quickly. No, that you should be able to explain different measures and concepts of errors. You should be able to describe different sources of error in engineering analysis and strategies to keep them under control. The third one is explain the complete representation of numbers. This is what we were doing last class, and its implication to the round-off error. Articulate the meaning of Taylor series and its significance in numerical analysis. That also we covered. Okay. So errors I told you about, all answers are approximate and we don't know the true value. But if you do know the true value, then you can find the true error and answer. But more important thing is going to be relative error, because absolute value is not as useful as looking at the relative value. Okay. Then I discussed about in reality whatever you call an error is actually an approximate error, because we are calculating our approximate value with a better approximate value. Okay. Truth, you always have to assume that you don't know. Whatever you do, you cannot find the truth. Okay. So I said, how do you get this better approximation? If it is a measurement, you have to get a better instrument. If it is a mathematical model that you're using, then you have to improve your model, or you have to use a better numerical approach to get the better estimate. Significant figures, I think we discussed a lot about it. It is a number of digits in an answer that you know for sure, that you can confidently use. Uh, and then precision and accuracy, I told you precision means having a method which gives same answer again and again. If you even with the uncertainty that you have in the model, if there is not too much uncertainty, then you call it as a, see, this is precision, this is precise. With different, you are pretty sure about your answer, that whatever you do in your model, you'll not, within the uncertainty, there is not too much variation. But if that answer is way off from the originality, the true value, then you say it is less accuracy. See here again, less precision. The answers are all over the place. But even that average is also far away from the true value. So this has low precision and low accuracy. Here, low precision, you have an instrument which you do like 10 different measurements, they're all over the place. But average, you take average of all that, they're trying to, it appears as if it's trying to find the correct answer, but it's not able to find it precisely. Okay, so there is no bias here. No, there is bias. So if there is bias, accuracy is low. If there is no bias, accuracy is high. If there is uncertainty, too much uncertainty, precision is low. If the uncertainty is very less, then precision is high. That we discussed. And numerical errors, I told you quickly: truncation errors, round-off errors, and convergence errors. So we were discussing about truncation errors. I told you about Taylor series. I'll not go through this again, but this is an infinite series, and we did a Taylor series for sine function. Okay, and then I said Taylor series can also be used to estimate the truncation error. As an example, I given you that when we use this formula for first derivative, uh, the Taylor series tells us that this is all we are neglecting. When we actually this exactly equals to the entire series, but when you drop off these terms, then you have to replace the equal to with approximately equal to. This is an approximation. Now, what is the error here? What is important here is, the error has many terms. What is important is the leading term, because that term has the smallest power of delta x, and whatever that power of the leading term is, that's called order of the method. In this case, this is first order method. Okay, which means the error is first order. Error will be proportional to delta x. Alternatively, if this is the leading term, let's say this is also included somehow. There are other formulas which give you higher order accuracy. If you do that, then the order will be proportional to delta x square. That will be called a second order method. Okay. Now I think then we changed over to the discussion on computer representation of numbers. I told you human beings in their brains, we understand numbers in binary, in decimal system. What is a decimal system? I think I told you, because we happen to have 10 fingers and 10 toes. So I think quite naturally we have made up a number system where it is all based on 10. What is the meaning of something being based on 10 decimal number? So in decimal numbers, so the place value, this is place value is okay, here this is the number. Place value is ones, tens, hundreds, 5,000s, six, you know, 10,000s and 100,000s. That's how the place value is changing. And if you look at that, the way that works out is 10 power 0, 10 power 1, 10 square, 10 cubed, 10 to the fourth power, 10 to the fifth power. Okay. And after the decimal point, these 10 to the negative 1 power, 10 to the negative 2 power, 10 to the negative 3, 10 to the negative 4. So the place values after the decimal point are negative powers of 10, and place values to the left of the decimal point are positive powers of 10. That is a number. But now in computer, everything has to be converted to binary system, because in computer everything is stored digitally, digits, only zeros and ones. So we discussed about how integer numbers are stored. That is pretty straightforward. And I told you, depending upon the kind of how many digits we are sparing, how many digits we are allocating for a given integer. There is only a limited range of integers that could be stored. For example, here I told you, if you are doing in a 8-bit space, if you want to store an integer in an 8-bit space, and if it is and if you want to store a signed integer, meaning it could take negative values also, in that case, what you'd get is, if you have 8 bits or a single byte, then the range of integers that could be stored here is simply 127, negative 127 to positive 127. That's all. Anything above that or below that cannot be stored. Okay, but anyway, in reality, we use much more space than that. So typically what happens is, we can store integers of much larger range. Uh, so integers is not a problem. Then we discussed how we do the floating point numbers. I told you that floating point numbers are normalized. See, if you remember, I wrote this. What is the meaning of normalization? The meaning of normalization is, all the real numbers, they're first written in this form. The form here is, let me grab my pen. So the form here is, you convert the number into a mantissa times 10 raised to an exponent. No, I'm telling this for your understanding, but in reality it is done in binary. So it's going to be a mantissa times 2 raised to some exponent. That is the format in which the number is to be converted. That's called normalization. And once you normalize the number, then all you have to store is the mantissa component, the mantissa or significant component, and then the exponent component. Okay, here. So, this is normalization. You'll get a mantissa times some base raised to an exponent. Okay. So here when I wrote them like this, mantissa will be in this range, 1 by b less than mantissa less than 1. So mantissa is always a fraction, and the smallest value it can take is 1 by b. Okay. Anyway, so For example, these were all converted. I think here this is base 10 system, base is 20. If you convert this base 10 number, then here's the mantissa, and see this is less than 1. Mantissa has to be less than 1. Okay, and then the 10 power exponent. So when you store them, you store the mantissa. I'm sorry, here I wrote the mantissa, and you store the exponent. Both of them have exponent is an integer, and both of them also have a sign. Okay, so I think here I was showing you how the integers are done. Integers are easy. Floating point number, we have to worry about the real numbers. So the real numbers are stored as two parts: a mantissa, which is also called a significand, and an exponent, which is also called a characteristic. Okay, so how do we get this mantissa and the exponent? By normalizing the number. Okay, characteristic or the exponent is an integer, and mantissa is a fraction, and both of them they also have sign. Mantissa could be positive or negative. That will decide the sign of the number itself. And then the exponent could also be positive or negative. Okay, here's an example. In decimal system, I had normalized a couple of numbers. So this is, for you, when we look at numbers as human beings, this is a more comfortable way for us to look at. 34587.98, 34,587.98. But if you want to store it in the computer, it has to be normalized something like this: 0.3458798 times 10 to the 5. Once you normalize this, then in computer these digits will be stored and that digit will be stored. Okay, that's how the storage is accomplished. So a number like this, it will get, when you normalize it, it will give a negative exponent. Anyway, along with this sign, you have to store these digits and you have to store these digits. Okay, so I think I have given an example, but when we are storing these digits, there is a limit to how many digits you can store, because you have to plan everything appropriately, right? You cannot have we cannot store, real numbers. They have lots and lots of digits following this one. You cannot store everything, right? You have to draw the line somewhere and say, well, this is this is the memory allocation I'm doing. This is the maximum number of digits that I'll carry, and that limitation is brought about by the way the computer is managing the numbers, managing its memory. Okay, when I write a computer language, I have to decide on how much space I will use to store each real number. Okay, so something like this. If you say I have this much space, then you have to make a decision. How much of that space will be used to store the digits in the mantissa? How much of this space will be used to store the digits in the exponent? And then we have to carry the sign of the exponent. We need one space for that, and sign of the number itself, or you could say sign of the mantissa. Okay, so why this is important? Why are we worried about this? The reason we are worried about this is because this has an implication to the round off error. When you do mathematics, when you do calculations in computers, you have to be mindful about the possibility that the round off error that happens because of the limited precision that is allowed in a computer could could introduce some error into the answers that you get. Okay, in the computer, that's called round off error. I think I was showing you an example again here only to exaggerate the problem, only to accentuate the underlying issue and let you understand, get you an appreciation for what is happening in the limited limited digit notation of numbers. you know I did this in the last class using only 7 digits. Imagine you designed a computer programming language where you are only using 7 digits to store the floating point number. Then, like I said, you have to decide how many digits to use for what. Okay, one digit you have to use for sign of the number. Well, I think if it is 0 positive and 0, in that location, if there is 0, you will take it to be positive number. If there is 1 there, let's say you take it to be negative number. Okay, so that's the sign of the number. Similarly, and we need another digit to store the sign of the exponent, and similar strategy. Okay, then value of the exponent. For that, let's say you allocate two digits, and then the digits in the mantissa for which you're allocating 3 digits. Okay, with this kind of system, I told you the smallest number that you can store will look like this: 0, 1, 1, 1, 1, 0, 0. Now this is the smallest number because mantissa cannot have any number smaller than this. Okay, because mantissa cannot be 0. And the first digits of the mantissa, by definition, see, mantissa is we put the dot in front of the first or the leftmost non-zero digit. So mantissa cannot start the 0. Mantissa in the beginning, the first digit of mantissa can never be 0. So the smallest mantissa possible is this. It has to be 1 here and everything zeros. Okay. So if you convert this, I think this here again mantissa, right? So this is 2 to the negative 1, 2 to the negative 2, 2 to the negative 3. Okay, and this one is 3, and this is negative sign negative 3. Okay, so I told you if you convert that number, I think I did it here. This will get it to be 0.0. This number, if you convert it to decimal, you'll get 0.0625. In the last class, I have done that. Okay, and the next possible number is this one. So this is the first possible number. The second possible number is 0111. You're incrementing the mantissa by 1 digit. When you do that, again, as I told you how this can be converted. The mantissa, you converted the decimal equivalent times 2 to the negative 3. You get this number. Okay, then this is the number after that. This is the number after that. Now, what you should be noticing here is, with this system, the smallest positive number that you can represent is this. So between 0 and if you have, let's say this is your computer implementation of numbers, and you do some computation and you get a number between 0.0625 and 0, somewhere in between. So that number cannot be stored here. Either you have to make it a 0 or you have to make it this number. So that is the cause for, again, the problem is very severe here because we have extremely limited number of bits. 7 bits for a floating point number is a joke. And you see why? Because see, it can represent only limited number of floating point in the real numbers. Exactly. Everything else has to be approximated to these limited numbers. Now, going on, these are the only this one, and this one. Okay, so 0, 1, 1, that is the 1, 1, 1, that is the exponent. Okay, and then another 1, 0, 1, that is the mantissa. So this is the exponent will give lowest positive number, negative 3. Okay, with that exponent, there are only 3 possibilities of mantissa. So this is one possibility. No, I'm sorry, 4 possibilities: 100, 101, 110, 111. These are the only 4 possibilities. So, and this is 0.125. So the next one is you are changing the mantissa to the next lower value. This is negative 2. Okay, and then the next one is going to be negative 1, the mantissa. Anyway, for each of the values of mantissa, there is only, I'm sorry, exponent, there are only 4 possible values for the mantissa. Okay, so from, see, this is how it goes. 0 you can store. If you make everything zeros, you're showing 0 in this number. 0, no problem. The next number is 0.625, and in between you cannot store anything. Any number in between cannot be represented exactly in the system that you have here. And far away from that, there is 0.125. Okay, and in between these two, there is only 4 numbers. 1, 2, 3. I'm sorry, only 3 numbers can be stored. Okay, these are the 3. So you can store that one, you can store that one, and you can store this one. But anything else has to be approximated by these numbers. Okay, anything else, and again from 1 to 5, if you keep going, the next limit is coming to be 0.25, and between 0.125 and 0.25 there's only 3 possibilities. Only these 3 can be represented exactly. If your computations are coming up with any other number other than this, they have to be rounded off to these numbers. Okay, so what happens, what is the implication of all this? The largest number that can be stored, the largest positive number that can be stored in the system is this one, just 7. This is the largest possible. Okay, positive, and then the exponent is also making positive 1 1. So this becomes, exponent is positive 3, and the mantissa is 3. Okay, so this, if I do the conversion, you'll get 7. So in this system, 7 is the largest number that you can store. Okay, here I'll give you a summary of what you have to understand here. Let me erase all the extra digits. Okay, see, ultimately, ideally, you would want to, when you say real number, I think you must have studied this when you were in school. See, real numbers, and we talk about number line. Okay, so 0 to infinity. Every point in this line is a real number. Okay, and there are infinite number of real numbers. Let's say this is 0, this is 1. How many real numbers do we have between 0 and 1? Anyone? Can anyone give an answer to that question? How many real numbers do you think we have between? Yes, please.
Infinite, sir.
Exactly, infinite. They're infinite. In any range, any again between 2 points, there is infinite. But but we cannot have all those numbers translated into computer storage. And I'm showing you the problem using a very limited, extremely limited memory allocation here. And with this kind of, if you're using 7-digit storage, I told you, see, between 0 and 6.0625, we cannot store any number there. Okay, see, between 0 and 0.625, you cannot store any number. But 0.652, this is 0.625, and then this next large number is 0.125, and this is 0.25, and this is going to be 0.5, I think, and this is going to be 1, and this is 2, this is 4, this is 7. Okay, so those numbers we can, if you see, those are the 2 powers. No. 0.25, 5, 1, 2, Yeah, this is correct. This is 4 and that is 7. And see, if you have this, and if you choose to do the mantissa and exponent 2 digits and 3 digits respectively, and there, see, between 4 and 7, we can only store 5, 6. Any real number, if this is the computer, if you try to find any other number, it has to be either rounded off or chopped off to 4 and 5. Okay, that is the cause of the, no, that is how we have to be worried about, when you have, in reality, don't worry, it's not going to be this bad, because in reality, we use 32 bits for floating point, and this is used to be old computers. All the new computers by default, they use 64-bit float numbers. Okay, and they use like, I'm trying to remember, some 23, 24 digits for mantissa, and 2 digits for the sign of the mantissa and sign of the exponent, and then in 32-bit, some 8 or 9, yeah, some 8 or 9 digits for the exponent. So in that, for 32-bit. For 62-bit, we have plenty more bits. So these gaps are going to be much smaller, but the fact is there are those gaps. I think I'll do an exercise when we do the practice session, but it is there. Okay, so these things to understand. First, okay, there is an underflow. See, if you have there are many real numbers in this range, right? If any of those numbers has to be stored, it cannot be done. That's called an underflow. Okay, where during the time of your calculations, you have, for example, in this system, you can store 0.625 and you can store 0.78125, no problems. But when you multiply them in the computer, the answer is going to be much less than 0.625, and that cannot be stored in this computer. Okay, in this system, so storage, in this strategy for storing the floating point numbers with only 7 digits, the product of 0.625 and 0.071825 cannot be stored. Okay, and that is called an underflow error. There is nothing wrong with the formula itself. It's just that it is outside the capacity of the computer to be able to store that number. Okay, similarly, in this very system, you can store 4, you can store 5, but if you multiply those two, you would get 20, in that computer. No, you can, but so even though these two numbers can be stored in this kind of system, the product of those two cannot be stored, and that is because that we call it as overflow error. Okay, so what I'm getting you to I'm trying to get you to understand is the fact that there is a limit to how small a number, positive or negative, that can be stored, and how large a number that can be stored. There's limitations to that, and more important limitation is, even within this range, we cannot exactly represent all the possible real numbers. Okay, if you want to represent something at this point in the number line, cannot be done. It has to be replaced with either this number or that number. Okay, then we have to talk about the strategy. Here I'm telling you, let's say you have a number 6.2. Will you store it as 6, or you have to store it as 6 or store it as 7? You cannot store 6.5 in this in this computer. So there are two strategies to that. I think, how would you do? If you get, generally what you learn in the school is, if you get 6.5 or above, you make it 7. If you get 6 point below 6.5, then make it 6. That is called a rounding off, round off, round off to the nearest possible number. So basically, you're looking at the distance. Once you have answer somewhere here, you see whether this is closer to this one or closer to that one. whichever is the closer, then you're saying, okay, let's forget about the difference. We'll simply call it as the closest number. That's called round off. Okay. If you do round off, these gaps at any x, those gaps are called delta x, because in that range, nothing can be stored. Okay. So if you do round off, then on an average, you'll do delta x error, delta x by 2 average error, because that's the maximum error possible, right? If you're here, you dot it up to next one, the error you made is that much, and the upper bound for that error, the kind of limit that you can be assured that the error will not cross is the delta x by 2 if you do the round off. But a more popular approach is what is called as chop off. What we do in chop off is, again, I'll draw it here. We'll take the same example. Let's say you have 6, you have 7. And in chop off, even if you get 6.9, let's say, we simply chop off. Forget about the additional. You go back to the whatever is the digit that we know for sure, and the additional whatever cannot be stored, just chop off. Okay, that's called chop off. If in doing so, you may make an error up to delta x. For example, see the number you got is 6.99999. In chop off, you'll make it simply as 6. So the error you made there is 0.99999, and the upper limit there is equal to 1, because here the delta x itself is 1. We have 6, we have 7. So the distance between these two is delta x is 1, and you might end up making that much error, delta x amount of error, if you do chop off. But even though chop off entails larger amount of error, it is a more popular strategy. Almost exclusively, the computers use chop off in the storage. Can you, okay, that is a fact I'm telling you. Computers use chop off, but I want you to think now and give me an answer why you think. I think, when we design computers, we design them to do chop off. Okay, you think of that, but before we go there, any questions on this? Any questions? Okay, okay. So now I think, okay, what are the implications? Why are we worried about this? Why should we be concerned about this? The reason we should be concerned about this is because this gives rise to what we call as round off error. The error, because whenever we get a computation done in a computer, we have to be mindful that the computer, because of its limitations with regard to representing the numbers, might introduce another sort of error, round off and chop off. I told you what round off is, what chop off is, and the upper bound, round off error in round off will be less than what is that, delta x divided by 2. Delta x is the gap between the consecutive numbers close to the answer itself. Okay, and error for chop off will have a larger limit, delta x. But even so, I told you, chop off is favored more. Can someone give me an answer? It's okay if it is wrong. There is, there's no punishment for giving wrong answers. So please tell me. But I think it helps you think. Why do you think computers use chop off, not round off? Anyone? Again, I'm telling you, please don't hesitate to give an answer. Even if it is wrong, it's okay. Absolutely fine. Anyone? Okay. Okay. I don't know. Actually, is it working? Can you guys hear me? Let me see. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Thank you. Okay, so I don't have to do that anymore. So you can actually hear me. Can someone tell me any reason? Even though the error is less, we don't do the round off. Okay, I'll give you the answer. Because this decision of whether to leave the do the chop off, this decision of round off and chop off, it is done millions of times. Look at how many how many computations have to be performed in a serious thing, and every intermediate calculation will also have to deal with this. So the reason people don't do round off is because it makes the process slow. Chopping off is easy. You just forget about it and cut it. But if you want to round off, at every time you do any single calculation, you have to compare and then decide. So that adds plenty of overhead to the computations. The computations will become very slow. At every step you want to check, where it is close to, whether it's close to the number, less than that or number more than that, whichever can be represented in the computer. If he has to think do that comparison every single time, that makes it too slow. So for the performance sake, to keep the computer performance good, it's not worth, actually it's not worth to make sure that the error is small, because I'm telling you again, I cannot stress this enough. In reality, this is very, very small. Okay? In reality, that's very, very small. Okay, yeah, I forgot to mention something. See, that delta x, which is the size of the gap, okay, that delta x is not same at all levels, if you see. Okay, see, the gap between the consecutive numbers, which can exactly be stored in the computer, it's not constant. See, for small numbers, the gap is very small. As the numbers grow larger, the gap is increasing. So now the gap is increasing, and then the gap is increasing. So when the numbers are small, the gap is small. When the numbers are increasing, then the gap is also increasing. So what stays constant? How can you estimate this? What stays constant is called a machine epsilon. Machine epsilon is this. Uh, the ratio delta x over x, how much error, what is the gap between the consecutive numbers that can be exactly stored in the computer, divided by the number itself. Where is this gap happening, near close to which point? That ratio is limited by machine epsilon. This ratio has an upper bound. You can be assured that this ratio will not be more than epsilon. This is machine epsilon. How do you get the machine epsilon? Machine epsilon is given by b raised to 1 minus t. B is the base of the system, base of the number system. For computers, it is 2. Okay, and t is the number of digits in mantissa. Number of digits in mantissa. Okay, for example, the thing we have here, in the example thing we have, the base is 2, and the mantissa we are storing has 3 digits. Okay, so the machine epsilon for this system is 0, no, 2 raised to negative 2, or 0.25. 0.25. So the delta x by x will be less than, no, for our system, the delta x by x has to be less than 0.25. I can show that example. For example, here, let's say you got a number 0.499999999. Okay, in chop off, in chop off, you'll write it to be 4. So the error you made is approximately 1. So that's delta x. Okay, and this is x. So if you see delta x by x, in this case is going to be 1 by 4 or 0.25. You see, in this system, this is the maximum error you can expect. That's the upper bound of the error. And you can do a similar calculation anywhere, you'll get the same thing. No, you'll get the error to be 0.25 or less. You will never get more than 0.25 relative error in this case. And that's called machine epsilon. And this is one formula that you could use to estimate the machine epsilon. Okay. Now, the second concern here is, round off errors, they could be small. If you only do one operation on two numbers, floating point numbers, the round off error that you would expect is very small. But the problem becomes more complicated when you do a series of operations, many number of operations on that number again and again. So this round off error, which is only very small amount for one or two calculations, it accumulates. If you're doing the calculations, hundreds and thousands of calculations, that small error accumulates, and it becomes larger. Okay, so you have to worry about, for small simple calculations, round off error is not a big thing to worry about. But if you happen to have a problem where you have to do large number of computations, then it is very much possible that the round off error gets accumulated, that the round off error multiplies, or it gets compounded and becomes a larger number. Okay, so again, I'll show an example of this in the practice session later today when I come in the last hour. Adding large and small numbers. Okay, here's what I'll tell you. Let's say you have a number 1, 2, 5, 8, 9, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, and then you have another number 0.0000547 Okay, if you add this number to that number, the number you will get is 125894321.000005478. Okay, look at, if you want to keep all significant digits, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. See, it's not possible to store all these digits. So when you add these things will be lost. You cannot store these. Those cannot be stored. Because when you convert this and this, this will be 1.2589432 times 10 to the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This is 10 to the 8. And the 8, and this one, 1, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, 0.5478 times 10 to the negative 6. Okay, if you add this, then it is going to be equal to 0.1 times 10 to the 8. It will still say, but then if you want to keep the entire thing, you have to store this many digits, and that's not possible. So that goes away in the chop off. So the chop off kicks in. It'll drop off all these extra digits. Then what happens is, when you're adding a large number to a small number, it is possible that the small number is not even making any difference. Okay. Again, this is not a very common problem that you'll encounter, but you have to be mindful of this, because when it happens, you should at least be aware that this could happen, so that you might look into that possibility. See, the last kind of thing that we'll discuss is that's called subtractive cancellation. And the problem here is, when you are subtracting numbers which are very close to each other, which are very similar, which are almost equal. Okay, and again there is a there is a problem on this. We'll do it. See, if you have 54326.784 here, you have 54326.781 here. If you subtract these two, then you'll get the answer is 0.003. See, in these ones you have many significant digits. Now you are down to one significant digit. The reason for that is because these two numbers are so close to each other. When you look at the difference, you lost the, there's not many significant digits to this answer. And that will make some errors look bad. Again, we'll do an example of that in the practice session. Okay, now let me review what we had done so far. We talked about definitions of errors. Okay, I talked about significant digits. And then we talked about precision and accuracy. And then we discussed about Taylor series. Yeah, I think the first thing is I told you about truncation error. And I told you how we can do it from Taylor series. And then I told you about round off errors, which we get from computer representation of numbers. Computer representation. Okay. Now, so this is what we told. So I think the reason we are talking about Taylor series is because it becomes important for truncation error. And the reason we discussed about computer representation of numbers because they're important for round off errors. There is another type of error called convergence error, which we'll discuss later. Convergence error. Okay, so combined truncation error, round off error, and convergence error, these constitute what we know as numerical errors. These are the errors that are being introduced into the solution because of the fact that we are solving the equations using a computer and using approximate formulas. Okay. In addition to these errors, okay, any questions so far? Any questions here? Okay. In addition to these errors, it is there are also other sources of error which are not necessarily because of solving it with the computer, but because of other issues. One of them is a model error. What is the meaning of model error? The model equation, when you're coming up with the model equation, you have to make some assumptions. And those assumptions introduce some amount of error into the solution. For example, in the parachute problem, in the bungee jumper problem that we have done, okay, we said that the drag coefficient is constant. That is an assumption. Now we said that the drag force is CD times V square, drag coefficient times V square. Now I'm telling you this is a model. This is an assumption because the drag, strictly speaking, it depends on a lot of things. Okay, I'll tell you this. I think I'll give you a funny example. I don't know how old were you when that movie came, Magadhira, when the hero jumps off the cliff, and I think he takes good 3 or 4 seconds after the heroine, she's dead and she falls into the valley, a very deep valley. I don't know how deep it is, but and then the hero goes back for a second, he thinks, and then he jumps after her. So now he wants to get closer to her. So he maneuvers and he tries to acquire some aerodynamic shape so that he falls faster than her and he catches up to her. By the way, do you remember what I'm talking about? Have you seen this? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Okay. So here the hero, he kind of try to assume an aerodynamic shape. So that because he has taken some time after her, right? She fell first, so she's going faster. So now he tries to maneuver so that he becomes a more aerodynamic and he approaches her. The point here, the reason he was able to fall faster than her, even though she fell first. Again, it's not. I don't think it's possible, but if you have to give a scientific reason to it, because he was able to reduce the drag force on him by maneuvering and becoming more aerodynamic. Okay, why is that relevant here? That is relevant here because in our model, we have assumed that the drag force is constant. That it need not be, depending upon the no the position of the bungee jumper. If he's spreading his legs and arms far away from the torso, he might affect the drag. Or if he squeezes into a little ball, drag is different. Okay, and if he tries to become very sleek, pulls everything together, the drag could be different. See, all those effects we did not consider in our model. We simply said, okay, the force is going to be dv dt, the rate of change of velocity is going to be the gravity minus cd over m v square. So when you write this model, you're automatically assuming that the drag is constant, which may not be true. No, this is a free person jumping. He could be doing some funny things. Maybe if he sticks his cell phone out, trying to get a selfie after him as he was jumping through the bungee, the drag is going to be different. Okay, so there are errors we make because of the assumptions we make in the approximations used in the model. Those are the model errors. Then talk about data uncertainty. What is data uncertainty? Whatever the model, see here, this drag coefficient is a parameter. But do we know 100% sure what the drag coefficient is going to be? If I say drag coefficient is 0.25, that's typically not possible. You can only say that it is 2 pi plus or minus 0.05, something like that. This is called uncertainty. You don't know data for sure. So you use the value 0.25, but the true value could have been 0.3 or 0.2. You don't know for sure. So that uncertainty, the fact that you don't know the parameters that are going to the model exactly, that introduces an error also. That's called data uncertainty error. You see, these errors are common. Whatever I'm telling you now, this is not because you're solving them in a computer. This is limitations of the model itself. Model makes approximations which may or may not reflect the reality. So there is an error there. Uncertainty. The model uses some parameters which you cannot know for certain the exact value for certainly, and that introduces an error. And finally, the mostly avoidable ones is called blunders. Okay. What is a blunder? It's a good old oversight. You're just made a mistake. Because you're not paying attention. For example, the blunders is what you do all the time. Unit errors. Okay. Let's say the model needs you write the model in SI system, and you ask somebody, you have a friend in US, you ask him what is G, he'll say 32.2. But that is the correct number, but it is in feet per second square. But your model is in SI system. Your model expects the G to be in meter per second square, 9.81. So this is also correct value for G, no problem, but it's in the wrong units. If you're careless and use this number here, that's a blunder. Okay, that's beyond everything else that we discussed right now. It is not a round-off error, it's not a truncation error, it's not a convergence error. It's not because of error in the model approximations. It's not because of uncertainty in the data. It is a good old blunder. Okay, when you're typing the formula or when you're punching the numbers in a calculator, you make a mistake. That's a blunder. Okay. That is also a source of error. Anyway, no, I'm discussing this only for the sake of completeness. These are not numerical errors, but these are still errors that you will encounter in mathematical modeling. Okay, any questions? I'll get attendance. Okay, and I'll come back. I'll come back in the last hour. Is there a easy way for me? I have prepared a notebook. I prepared a notebook for the next practice session. I'll send it to the same group of students who I sent it to last time, because I'll use the same email group. I request them to share with other people. Okay, and please go through that. I don't know. I think you don't have time to go through it today before the class, but after the class you go through it. Okay. So I'll stop this recording. Kulmani. Okay, Kulmani is already here. I'm time a little late. Okay. I stopped the recording.